What's up, guys? It's your boy Wimpy back with another podcast. Today we're going to be talking about psychological warfare again, all right? Because we are at war with an enemy that we can't see. We don't really know who that enemy is, or if it's just a bunch of enemies that are conspiring against America as a whole. But there are forces that want to see America fall. All right, and I want to preface this by saying that I'm not an anarchist, okay? I know the title of this podcast, Rebel Revelations, might make people believe that I'm an anarchist or a communist or a revolutionary, something of that sort, but no, I believe in limited government, okay? Limited government, but I believe that government needs to regulate corporations because corporations can get out of hand, and we'll explain that in the coming bits of this podcast, okay? But, yeah, ideological subversion. I've talked about this before. Yuri Bezmenov was the KGB defector that came and told us about it, all right? And I'm about to play a clip for you guys where he explains basically what ideological subversion is, okay? Go watch the full video for yourselves. It's not very long, so it won't take much of your time. He explains it in detail, but for copyright issues, I can only play a clip. All right, and the clip only gives you a little bit, but here it is.
Only about 15% of time, money, and manpower is spent on espionage as such. The other 85% is a slow process, which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in four basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation.
All right. So, like I said, go watch the full video. He just started talking about demoralization, which is the first stage, and I believe has already been completed. But yeah, you want to get the whole picture from him. And his point of view, back when the Soviet Union was still a thing, they were actively trying to subvert American citizens to fall into communist ideology so they'd tear the country apart or revolt. And then after the revolution, the communist government that would be put in place would get rid of those people that initially supported them, because once they woke up to the reality of socialism, they'd realize that they've been fooled, and then they'd send those people to labor camps and stuff like that, and begin the final stage of normalization, which would be like a 1984 dystopia. I'd also recommend you read the book 1984. But the principle here, ideological subversion, psychological warfare. Okay, what he's saying is that the Soviet Union was doing it. The Soviet Union ain't around anymore, but our enemies, which we have many, can use the same format for war, economic war, okay, which is kind of why, in my opinion, we went and invaded Venezuela to protect the U.S. dollar, because the dollar is becoming worthless. And China and Russia, they are trying to create a petrodollar. They're buying up silver, gold to combat the U.S. reserve currency, all right? They're trying to get our economy to collapse. But also, you can see the ideological war, psychological war, trying to subvert our population through communist ideologies, which I have personally experienced, right? I've went to college twice. First time I dropped out with a 4.0, okay? But I didn't think college was for me. Luckily, at that college, it was a respectable college. They didn't have like any ulterior motives other than educating the people that went there. All right. The second college I went to, and I'll just call them out, Western Carolina University, they have a high acceptance rate. You could be brain dead and still get in there. All right. As long as you have a pencil. And I think that's for a reason, to subvert people. All right. And I might have been in the belly of the beast. I was doing I was majoring in sociology and psychology, double majoring. But there was communist or Marxist posters in that building, the building where they had that program in those classes. And in the textbook I was reading from, it was also talking about communist ideology. So that started, I didn't want to read the book after I read the first chapter, but once they whipped out the gender unicorn, that was like when I was completely done. I was like, okay, this is bullshit. And I just stopped doing my work and I flunked out, okay? Because I'm not going to stand for that, all right? I'm not just going to go along with what they're saying just so I can get a degree, all right? I have standards here. I have morals, okay? But basically, like what Yuri Bezmenov is saying is that they infiltrate the colleges. It's a re-education program. Okay, back then they didn't have social media, so in order to ideologically subvert a population, they'd have to infiltrate the educational systems, which would be colleges. All right, when people are young and their brains aren't fully formed yet, it's easy to program them. They infiltrate these colleges and start teaching this Marxist ideology and stuff like that to get these people to become demoralized, to realize that the system's broke. All right. And they'd also push for capitalists to continue being capitalists and making more and more money, because that's only going to piss off the working class, right? As corporations make more money, the working class, they're going to be losing money. All right, there's a transfer of wealth here. As the rich and powerful continue to become more rich and powerful, the working class and the people that aren't in the managerial class, they continue to get more poor. All right, and they have less power, which would push them to accept a communist ideology and to revolt against the ruling class, which would result in a communist or socialist government, which once it has power and control, it will hold on to that power, and it would be almost impossible to stop it, like in the book 1984. And in the book 1984, there's the Ministry of Truth, the Ministry of Re-Education, I believe. I might be misquoting that, but changing history, and it's all focused on targeting people's minds, re-educating them. Okay? And the stages, first stage, already complete demoralization, demoralize the population, get them bickering with each other. And then this generation that's already demoralized, they start to take public office, they start to get into positions of power and influence, and that's when things really start to get bad, destabilization, all right? And this is where I want to kind of veer off of Yuri Bezmenov's path here, because I think the destabilization process is kind of changed in a little bit. It's like our government, our two-party system has been weaponized to destabilize our country, to get the parties fighting in amongst themselves. Okay, so now it's not about doing what's best for the American people. It's about doing what's best for the Republican Party or the Democrat Party or whatnot. And then this causes the government to kind of halt. All right, because if you want to pass a bill that's good for the American people, or to stop these forces from taking over, it's almost impossible, because there's just going to be inward fighting. All right, they'll filibuster a bill, or they won't vote for a bill because it was introduced by a Republican or a Democrat. All right, the cogs in the machine have slowed down, so we can't find real progress that would be best for the American people. But the targeting the economy has definitely been what's happening. All right. In the second video, I talked about the Maynard Keynes quote. I believe that's his name, The Economist, or Keynes, Maynard Keynes, something. I believe that's his name. All right. But he was the economist, and he came up with the idea to spend during a depression and to save during prosperity, but our government never stopped spending. And he also quoted Lenin saying that the best way to, I'm paraphrasing here, but the best way to establish a communist government is by implementing a central bank that will steal wealth from people very subtly through inflation, okay? When the government prints money, that money doesn't go to the lower class, it goes to the corporations, and they bail out banks and stuff like that. The banks caused the crash, the Great Depression, and the 2008 financial crisis. The government bails it out. The U.S. Reserves bails these banks out while the American workers suffer because of it. And this is just pushing the workers more towards revolution and communist ideology, okay? And the quote that Yuri Bezmenov says, and I believe it's originally attributed to Marx, but the capitalists will be hung with the rope that they sold, okay? They're just making things worse, all right? They're just pissing people off even more, all right? As they make more and more money and steal more and more wealth from the working class. All right. But that's all geared towards communism. All right. There's other forces at play here. Okay. Yeah, the Soviet Union ain't around anymore, but Putin was a former KGB agent. Okay. So he could be still implementing these things too. The Chinese government, they could be implementing it too through TikTok and stuff, trying to subvert our population through TikTok. And you know, once a feed gets you sucked in, it starts feeding you all these conspiracy theories and stuff to get you, I don't know, to screw with your head, all right, to incentivize distrust in the government. But you shouldn't trust our government because there is a blatant corruption, like with Minnesota, all right? A YouTuber in his early 20s, he's the one who had to go out there and uncover billions of dollars of fraud, okay? And that's just a result of our system. The system's becoming corrupt, and it's only pushing people towards socialism, all right? And socialism is not the answer, all right? Trying to rid our government of fraud and corruption and to force our politicians to actually do what's best for American people, that's the solution, all right? And like I said, I'm not an anarchist, all right? I believe in limited government. I'm a constitutionalist, all right? But what limits government, all right? When the government decides to break its own rules, to lie to its people, all right, what's going to stop it from doing that? The people are supposed to check the government, okay? So, yeah. In this war, all right, this ideological war or this psychological war, the warriors aren't your traditional soldiers, right? The traditional soldiers who go and fight a kinetic war, you know, they actually shoot guns and stuff. In this war, it's all about influencers. Who has the most influence? Who can change the population's minds, all right? Who can push people in the right direction or the wrong direction, all right? So now we have influencers who might not be working for the best interests of the American people. They might be getting paid by some corporations or some foreign countries, right? And pushing an agenda not for the American people, but for these foreign actors, all right? So we need influencers who push in the opposite direction, who push in the best interests of the American people, all right? And in the last episode, I probably went too far, all right, going after Andrew Tate. But the point I'm trying to make here with Andrew Tate is that we need influencers who are willing to die for what they believe in, okay? And what I'm saying with Andrew Tate is he's not willing to die for what he believes in, probably because he doesn't really believe in it. If somebody truly believed what they were doing, they would be willing to give their lives for it, like Martin Luther King Jr., all right, or William Tyndale, or Martin Luther King, the original, or not Martin Luther King, but Martin Luther, all right? Jesus is an excellent example, all right? And they didn't get millions of dollars from pushing their agenda and stuff like that. They were doing it for the people, right? That's another argument I'd make, is that Andrew Tate wasn't doing it for the best interests of the people. He was doing it to sell Hustlers University and make money off of it. He made a good bit of money off of his webcam girls in the early 2010s, or in the 2010s, maybe not early. But he didn't really start bringing in millions of dollars of revenue every month until he became famous and started to push Hustlers University and his online ventures and stuff. All right. He made a lot of money off of his fame, and he knew how to get people to buy into what he's saying. All right. Because a lot of what he's saying on the surface is very true. Yeah. You know, the Matrix is real. The Matrix as an idea of this system that's set in place that only benefits the rich and powerful while it's putting you down. And his solution to break out of the Matrix is to get rich. But I would argue that's not what you need to do. All right. You don't need to be focusing on making money. You need to be focusing on doing what's right for your fellow neighbor, for doing what's right for God. All right. Serving God, not your own interests of making money. All right. And then once you have this solid base, the solid belief that you're willing to die for, now you're ready to fight. You're ready to fight in the war, the psychological war, okay, over America. Because we're at stake here, all right? Things are getting worse. I am anticipating a depression, a Great Depression, because our economy is collapsing. Maybe Trump will be able to salvage it, okay? Yeah, we can argue about the legality of us invading invading and capturing Maduro and stuff like that. But if he pulls it off and it's beneficial for the American people, if he actually saves the US dollar, then sure, fine, it's great, okay? But if it doesn't work and we continue to fall into economic depression, we're going to have problems, all right? And we got to stop the AI business, all right? Particularly the companies of Palantir and Oracle, all right? They're data companies. Their whole objective is collecting data, all right, so the government can use it. And this is a power that our government should not have, all right? If a communist government has this power, it's over, all right? The communists, they rule through information, all right? Taking information from their citizens, re-educating them, all right, attacking their brains. And you do this through data and information, all right? And Oracle, the company, it was based in a CIA project or operation, Project Oracle, I believe, or Operation Oracle, where it was a data centered project where the CIA wanted to collect a bunch of data because that's how they find terrorists and stuff, which it could be good, all right, in stopping a terrorist attack, but it's a double-edged sword because it could also be used to control the population, all right, to increase government power, all right? And we have to keep the government limited, like our founding fathers, all right? They were willing to die for what they believed in. They fought a whole war over it. So these companies, it's game over. Once they open up all their AI data centers, which are making more and more to collect more data on you. If the government ever did become communist or totalitarian, it'd be almost impossible to revolt against it because they'd have all your data. They'd know that you're going to revolt before you can ever do anything, before you can organize, all right? And it'd be over. Total control, all right? So that we have to fight against this, all right? And this data, it can be weaponized against you through algorithms, all right? The algorithms get you sucked in, and then it feeds you all this misinformation to ideologically subvert you. But it's different for each person. So these algorithms are designed for you personally, all right? The more data it has on you, the more it knows about you, all right? And a lot of these algorithms, it knows more about you than you do. I recommend you watch the docuseries or the documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma. It goes into the social media algorithms, which was the earliest form of AI, how it gets you sucked in, all right? And if these algorithms haven't already been weaponized, they can be weaponized to influence an entire population, all right, to ideologically subvert them. All right, so we got to fight back against the data collection. All right. Trying to think if there's anything else I want to talk about. I mean, my advice to you guys. Yeah, I mean, that's the mainstream thing that Andrew Tate and others push, is to get in the gym and work out. That's the one thing that they can't stop you from doing. All right, but that's not enough. All right, working out ain't going to make your life better. All right, well, it's going to make you happier. It's going to change the chemicals in your brain to make you happier, yeah, but it's not going to get you to buy a house. All right, working out in the gym ain't going to magically make a house appear for you. Okay, our economy is only getting worse. Our people aren't able to buy houses anymore, okay, unless you inherited money of some sort. And that was the American dream. I argued this in like one of the previous podcasts not too long ago. We have to fix the system before the solution destroys us. All right. If we don't fix things, if we don't fix our economy, if we don't force our politicians to do what's best in our best interest, to regulate corporations, to go back to the Sherman Antitrust Act and actually implement it, to stop lying to its people, to do what the people actually want, release the Epstein files, all right, stop all this blatant fraud. If the government fails to do all this, if it fails to hold people accountable, the people are eventually going to revolt, and the solution is going to make things a lot worse. Okay, we don't want a communist government, and we don't want no government at all. We don't want to just completely abolish the government, because the government is needed. All right, and I'll use this example. When I took an American government class, if I remember this correctly, the way it was explained to me is, imagine a community of shepherds. All right, you only have so much land, okay, and that pasture, it can only support so many sheep. All right, if the community lives just off of sheep, we'll keep it simple for this example. So everybody in the community agrees to not have more than, let's say, 3 sheep, all right, per household, okay, because if anybody decides to get more sheep, then there's not going to be enough pasture, and the sheep will die. They will starve because there's not enough grass for them to graze. All right. Without a government, somebody along the lines will decide, hey, I want more. I want more. 3 sheep ain't doing it for me. I want to live in luxury. So they get 5 sheep or 6 sheep. And then once they do that, their neighbor might see it and be like, hey, he got 6 sheep. Why can't I have 6 sheep? So he gets 6 sheep. And then once people just decide to screw the rules that was just kind of put in place and expected to be followed, then they get more of sheep, and then they all die because there's not enough pasture for the sheep to feed on. Okay, the sheep starve out, and so do the people. So the idea here is we need a government to make sure that people don't get more sheep than they need, all right, to regulate people, all right, to make sure people don't murder each other, to make sure people don't steal, all right, to protect its citizens, all right. So that's what government is needed for. Now, there might be a time, and I believe there will be a time, where we won't need government, okay? And that's when people decide to actually love their neighbors as themselves and to love God, all right? To put the needs of others over themselves, all right? Like, I already brought this up, but the James Madison quote from the Federalist Papers: if men were angels, no government would be necessary, all right? That's what we want. We want to make sure that people are angels, all right? And that would involve re-education, re-educating our kids to uphold certain values, to have certain morals, all right? To care about people, and not incentivizing people to make more money or to only care about themselves, okay? To screw as many women as they want, screw your neighbor's wife, all right? When those values is what's being pushed, which is being pushed through our society, the society is going to collapse. Because once people start caring about themselves more than others, and the government ain't there to regulate them, it's going to collapse just like those sheep herders. All right. So for now, we need a limited government. But if the government becomes too powerful, it could take all the sheep of those people and just keep it for themselves and decide who gets to eat and who doesn't. All right. And if the sheep herders want to do something different, if they want to leave, they have to go to the government and ask for its permission. So we have to keep the government limited. And the people are what keep the government limited. Okay. Because our government has, I'll use this example. I wanted to bring this up too, but we don't even need need warrants anymore, or police agencies don't, because they can just buy your data. They don't need a warrant to buy your data. So they just buy your data from second source companies that collect your data. All right. So they won't need a warrant for it. And that's just an example of the government controlling and expanding its powers and overruling your Fourth Amendment right. Okay. So what do we do about it? All right, that's the real question at the end of the day. And like I said before, a house divided cannot stand. We have to come together. We have to become informed. We have to be aware that we are at war. We're in a psychological war. We have to filter out our influencers. We got to figure out which influencers are doing it just for a profit, which influencers actually care about the people, and which influencers are just doing it for foreign influence. Okay. And then once you become educated, you need to speak the truth. You need to speak out and try to get people to wake up to reality. All right. You are in the fight too. All right. You might just be a foot soldier. You might not be a general or a massive influencer, but you have a part to play. You have to wake your neighbor up. Okay. And if you don't, the consequences are dire, because our country is at stake. Okay. Maybe we could be cynical, and maybe things are just too far gone at this point. Maybe America will collapse, like I brought up in the prophecies book. But we have to act like things aren't set in stone. We got to try to salvage our country here, guys. We have to try to make a better world for our children. All right. And I wanted to put this quote in the last podcast, but I'll end this podcast with it. All right. Bobby Sands, we talked about him in the last one. But here's his quote. Our revenge will be the laughter of our children. Just think about that. Okay. Think about your children. Because if we don't do anything, it's our children who are going to suffer. All right. So, stay warm, guys. I hope the weather ain't got you in dire circumstances. I hope you guys have power. But be good.